Paranormal Square, where we share real life ghost experiences from around the world. The following stories that you will hear are 100% real, and we encourage you, our listeners, to share your stories with us as well. We look forward to hearing from you. The following story is from the Ghost Radio official channel based in Thailand. One of the subscribers of that channel called in during a live stream to share an experience that he recently had. Koa worked as a food delivery driver in Bangkok. One evening, while he was out doing deliveries, his attention got diverted from the road, and he was involved in a terrible automobile accident. When he came to, he realized that he was in some sort of medical facility. He was in a bed. He hurt terribly, and as he looked around, he tried to figure out his new surroundings. He realized that there were two other patients in the room with him. When he looked down to his left, there was a patient in a bed down to his left, and when he looked to his right, down to his right, he looked and saw a patient in that bed as well. The nurse, realizing that he was awake, came in and explained that he had a broken arm, a broken leg, and his jaw had been fractured, and that he had plowed into the back of a 10-wheeler truck. And he was in a hospital recovery room, and he was going to be there for a while, but that she would be back to check on him a little later. A little later, the nurse came back in and checked on Koa, and then went down and checked on the patient to his right, at the foot on his right-hand side, and then the nurse left. Koa couldn't figure out why the nurse didn't stop and check on the patient down to his left, but again, he passed out. A little later on that evening, he got awake by the sounds of somebody coughing, very loud coughing. It sounded like somebody was in terrible pain. And he looked down to his left, and the patient in that bed was coughing terribly, and sounded like they were in a lot of pain. And then the patient sat up, and there was blood coming out of the patient's mouth. Koa was frozen. Koa couldn't move with a broken arm. He didn't know what to do. And the next thing you knew, he passed out. He woke up the next morning, and that patient was no longer in that bed. The patient down to his left, there was nobody there. The thing had all been cleaned up. The bed was all made. The area was all clean. The patient down to his right was still there, and that person was there, but the patient on the left was not there. And it's running through Koa's mind. Now, how did they do this? How did they get it cleaned out? When did he move out? And he just figured, well, I'll just leave this alone. The doctor came in that day and explained he would be there for a couple more days in the recovery room, and that he would be okay. So that day went by. The next day went by fine, and then that night it was just he and the guy and the patient in the bed down to his right when he went to bed. During the night, he was again awakened by the sounds of loud coughing, and sounded like somebody was in terrible pain. And when he looked down, the patient in the bed down to his left was there again. Now, he couldn't figure out where that patient had been all day, and how he got back into the room after Koa had fallen asleep, but that patient was back down there in the bed to his left. And when he looked to the right, that patient was down in that bed, it was still there, but facing away from the bed on the left, and shaking like they were kind of scared. So Koa looked down again to the bed on the left-hand side, and that patient again was coughing, and coughing. It sounded in terrible pain. And that person again sat up in the bed, and there was blood coming out of that patient's mouth. But Koa was freaking out. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't do anything, really. And the next thing you know, it was morning again. He had passed out, and he woke up, and he swore he had to ask the doctor when the doctor came in that day to find out what was going on with that patient down on his left-hand side. It was still very difficult for him to talk, and he couldn't communicate with the doctor that day, so he had to leave it go for another day. And on that third night when he went to bed, when they all went to bed, again, it was just he and the person down on the right-hand side. That bed was empty again on the left-hand side. It was just the two of them. And that night, for whatever reason, the nurse decided to close the curtains around his bed and I guess the one down on the right-hand side as well. When he woke up in a little bit, he saw a pair of feet standing down on the left-hand side bed, and he was now totally confused because when he went to bed, there was nobody there, and now there was a pair of feet. And he thought he must be seeing stuff. So he closed his eyes, blinked real quickly, and he looked back down, and those feet were gone. Now he's totally confused. He doesn't know what to think. The next day, he knows he has to talk to the patient down on the right hand side because he's looking down there now, and that person's again scared and afraid. And he looked to say something to that person down on the right hand side, and the person looked back at him and put his finger across his mouth as if to say, "Don't say anything." And so he didn't. The next day, when he was able to move around, and Cole was at that point being able to move around a little bit, he went over and talked to the patient that was in the bed on the right hand side. They asked the story about what was going on with the one on the left hand side, and had that patient heard the same noises and heard the same things. The patient on the right hand side said that he had heard all the noises and what have you, but he was scared. The noises were so bad. And truth be told, there was never anybody in that bed the whole time the Koa was there. That bed had been empty for the whole time the Koa was in that recovery room. The patient that was in that bed had died 2 days prior to Koa being admitted to that recovery room. Again, there was nobody in that bed the whole time the Koa was there. Koa immediately transferred out of that recovery room into a private bedroom.